Welcome to Business Elevated, a Utah Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity podcast. We explore the stories and strategies behind Utah's thriving economy. I'm Pete Codella. More than just a source of thrills, Lagoon is a cornerstone of Utah's summer economy and a rite of passage for countless young employees. However, with any seasonal job and a young workforce, many regulations, labor laws, and nuances must be considered. Fortunately, this Utah employer has found the right mix of in-house and outside resources to assist with these considerations. Today we're talking with David Gray, Director of Human Resources at Lagoon Amusement Park, and Rob Coursey, attorney and owner at Modern Age Employment Law. We'll also hear from Nancy Sylvester, a labor and employment attorney at the Ogletree Deakins law firm. She'll share her experience as a parent of a teen who works for Lagoon. We're including this conversation because some of my fellow leaders and the Utah Women in Leadership Project's Bolder Way Forward initiative suggested we include Lagoon as a good example of an organization that trains and helps young workers enter and understand what's appropriate in the workplace. David and Rob, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Pete. Excited to be here.
Well, we're talking about Lagoon today. I think a lot of our listeners will relate to the subject matter and probably have lots of personal experience. Let's go to you, David. What's your favorite memory at Lagoon?
Oh, I have so many memories at Lagoon. For so many people, they come to the park and it's all about the rides and the attractions and the food and the games and the entertainment. For me, when I think about Lagoon, it's about friends that I've made over the last 30 years. At Lagoon, we don't call them our friends. We call them our family. There's such a bond with the people that I've worked with for so many years. In fact, a few years ago, someone asked me, are you going to your high school reunion? I'm like, no. Why would I want to go to a high school reunion? But if someone said, do you want to go to a reunion and be with all those people you met working at Lagoon 25 years ago, or while I was working at high school, I'd be like, sign me up. That's what comes to my mind as I walk around the park. It's those summer memories, working my tail off, scooping ice cream or making corn dogs or whatever it was. That's my core memories of Lagoon.
Rob, favorite memory?
I tell you, it's David's enthusiasm that really is contagious to me. And my new favorite memory of Lagoon happened just a couple months ago. I'm part of an organization you may have heard of called Salt Lake SHRM, Society for Human Resources Management. And we decided to do a member appreciation event at Lagoon. So first, I proposed the idea to David. He was very amenable to it. And it was the coolest thing that I possibly could have imagined it being, because we had David get up and tell our group, which was a very sizable group, by the way, one of our best attended events we've ever done with Salt Lake SHRM. And David got to tell his story about how he got into Lagoon, some of the stuff he just shared moments ago, and then specifically about their HR practices. And it was so dang cool to hear that. And I've known David for about 13 years now, and I've heard bits and pieces of the story, but I've never heard it all told like that. So that's sort of a unique new favorite memory of Lagoon. I had a great time riding the rides and everything that day too, and that would have been my answer prior to this occasion, but that is now my favorite Lagoon memory, very much because of David and his enthusiasm for everything they do there.
Rob, do you know my friend Sheena in SHRM?
He was our president a few terms ago. Yep.
Yeah, she and I both volunteer with the Bolder Way Forward initiative to advance women in work in Utah.
That is very cool. So do I. I love how this podcast idea got proposed. So Bolder Way Forward, we had our annual summit about 2 months ago, and I was in a breakout room where the topic was workplace sexual harassment. To make a long story short, there was probably about 20 of us in the room, and one of them, probably the youngest woman in the room, I'm guessing she was in her early 20s, and she told a story about how she was a lifeguard at Lagoon a few years prior, and it was her very first job. She told the room as she was getting tears in her eyes that she had no idea how great Lagoon and specifically the HR team and management and leadership and David were at creating a safe environment there that was free of not only disrespect and just bullying and meanness, but some nasty legal issues like sexual harassment. She was telling us how she didn't realize how special that was until, unfortunately, she left the Lagoon job and started getting some other jobs. And I think she's had like 3 jobs since then, and they were not the same experience. And she had some very unpleasant experiences feeling disrespected as a woman, unsafe as a woman, and sexually harassed as a woman. And it was through those negative experiences, unfortunately, those negative experiences, that she realized how amazing Lagoon was at creating this environment. And that led to the topic of, hey, let's talk to David about what they're doing right there. And then Nancy Sylvester, through knowing that you have this podcast, proposed the idea of, I think you guys should be on this podcast. And here we are today. And I love being able to brag on David and Lagoon and the HR team there because they really are doing something special. And that was so cool for me to hear it from an actual young woman who now really understands the experience.
And what I'll share, we're recording this the day after Wallet Hub published its ranking of gender equity issues. And for the 10th consecutive year, Utah is number 50. So we still have work to do in this area. And it takes all of us to make positive change.
Absolutely.
All right, David, let's talk about Lagoon. You've been there, I think, 31 years. That's a long time, my friend. What is it about Lagoon that's kept you there?
I love my job. I think that's the first thing I would say when you say, why are you still there? I love my job. I love the people I work with. I started when I was 15. When I started at Lagoon, there wasn't a lot of employment places that employed young people in the 90s. I had several people in my neighborhood that had worked at Lagoon, and it was just kind of one of those things. It was a rite of passage. You got a summer job. I don't even know that it was a question if I was going to get a summer job. I went to Farmington Junior High, and I got in line to get an interview at 6 a.m, waited in line hoping that I would get a job. I was so nervous. I remember I interviewed with a young woman named Camille, who was actually one of the food managers at the time. She offered me a job in the food division, and I got assigned to the Opera House ice cream parlor, which is no longer there, but it was by the Opera House. It's now where the Subway location is, and I scooped ice cream all summer long. And can I tell you, I hated it. I'm a very social person, and it was not a busy location. I worked all the way to the end of the season, and I went back the next summer as a 16-year-old, and I worked in Corn Dog Corner, dipping corn dogs, and I loved it. I loved that summer. I made so many great friends. The next year I came back and I was a seasonal supervisor at Parkway Pizza, and the next year I promoted up to the next level of leadership, and I worked 5 years, and I took a 2-year sabbatical and got back from serving in a mission. And at that time I was like, well, what am I going to do? I went back to Lagoon, right? I'm like, what a great job. I can work during the summer and focus on my studies in the winter, and I did. So I was going up to Weber State University, graduated from Weber State University, and of all things, not hospitality or food service, but in healthcare administration. To me, I was like, that's a steady career path. There's always going to be a need for healthcare. And actually, shortly after graduating, got married, and my wife also works at the park. I met my wife here and wasn't ready to leave. I was enjoying what I was doing in food service at the time. I thought, I'll do this for a couple more years. I was very fortunate that at the time, the HR department, I interviewed for that and I came over. I've been doing HR for the last 18 years. And I can honestly say, we've made a lot of progress. Some of my most personal, professional things that I'm proud of accomplishments is really that we've developed an HR department, that we've turned this into something that people rely on. I count myself very lucky to be in this industry. It's a great industry to be in. What better thing to be in the industry of fun and taking care of people? Not only do I get to have a career, I get to be something I'm passionate about, and I get to be part of it every single day, and I love it.
Rob, let's talk about your career. I believe you've got a bachelor's in English and a law degree, that you taught English in China, that you have been a personal trainer and an attorney. So what about those varied experiences has got you to where you are today?
Starting with the English degree, I did not choose an English degree for any noble reason. It was really because I felt like it was an easy degree. I liked creative writing. I had these notions of being the next Stephen King when I was 18, 19 years old. And then I really did not take college undergrad at all seriously. I was a terrible student. So I graduated with very little prospects. And unfortunately, a lot of English majors don't have a lot of job prospects, but certainly I did not at the time. So what I did, instead of trying to figure out my big boy career at that point, at age 22 or 23, whatever I was, I decided to go spend a year in the People's Republic of China. They were one of the few countries that allowed Americans to come over to teach English without a teaching degree, as long as you had some kind of undergrad degree. Thought it'd be the most interesting, the most unlike any experience I ever had, and boy, was I right. Physically, it was a very challenging year. It was hard living in China. This is early 90s, but it really set me on the path that I really think is the path that I am still on. What it did for me, among other things, was help me realize how amazing and rare and precious our American system of government and the freedoms that we have here in America are, that a lot of us, I don't know how I ever would have appreciated those concepts without leaving the country and living in a very different system in communist China. It sort of gave me clarity that, hey, I I think I want to be a part of this American system, this legal system. And that's really what helped me decide to go to law school. I ended up choosing Georgia State Law in Atlanta, Georgia. It fit into my schedule very well, a class called Employment Discrimination. I had no particular interest in that topic at the time. But after 3 or 4 classes taught by a really awesome professor named Mary Radford, something clicked. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And this is my second semester of my second year of law school. So I had already had I was halfway through law school, basically, without really any idea what kind of law I wanted to practice. As soon as I took this class, I knew. Lo and behold, that's all I've done ever since. I graduated from law school, ended up going to a great employment law firm called Fisher Phillips in Atlanta. Did that for 10 years. By the end of that 10 years, right around year 8 or 9, really right after I made partner, I just had this moment of thinking, I don't know if this is the right path for me. I thought that it was no longer physically or emotionally healthy for me. And I was like, I need to do something different. Did something very totally new. So going to the next thing that you listed, I was a personal trainer. I got certified and did that for 2 years at one of our local gyms here in Salt Lake City. And that was a really awesome job. It was fun. I met a lot of great clients. I loved working with clients. It was very rewarding. After about 2 years of being a personal trainer, I found an organization here in Utah called Employers Council. And they're not a law firm, but they're sort of like a law firm, and they focus on the employment relationship. And I joined them as one of their employment lawyers. It began the second chapter of me being an employment lawyer, and I realized I do love this. I just didn't like litigation. And I was there from 2010 to 2012, and it just wasn't the place for me anymore. Back in late 2021, I started my company, Modern Age Employment Law. Wasn't planned out, but each one of those really naturally segued into the next and really helped set the stage for where I am today. And I love being on my own. I can't imagine ever now going back and working for another company and having a boss and having to sit through meetings with anyone other than myself.
Well, David, I think Lagoon, you will hire teenagers 14 years and older. Employing minors, I imagine, comes with some challenges and opportunities. Why don't you talk about how you approach working with young people and teaching them what entering the workforce is like?
We hire young people as young as 14 years old. We have all the way up from there. The most common question I get when people ask about hiring youth is, why would you do that? They're so challenging. There's so many things that make it difficult. And from an HR perspective, I always say working with adults is horrible, right? Working with young people is such a great experience. If you ever question their abilities, you are mistaken, right? Our young people are very capable. They're very intelligent. They want to do a great job. It's providing them the tools and opportunities to be successful. And I think that's something that at Lagoon we've mastered. We've mastered the concept of giving people the opportunities and watching them flourish. You know, young people come in probably less prepared than I think they did many years ago. Young people come, they may not know how to sweep a floor. They may not know how to wipe a counter. They may not know how to have a conversation with people, but we provide them with the opportunities to learn those skills. Everyone always says it comes with the challenges. I think it comes with the opportunities. Young people are great. They want to learn. They want to do a great job. I can honestly tell you some of our most hardworking and most energetic team members that we have are those 14, 15-year-olds because they're just so excited to be in the workforce. They're excited to be earning money and learn something new. It's a responsibility that I take serious. It's a community service that we're offering as well. You know, a lot of these young people come and work with us and we're teaching them these soft skills, you know, how to provide good guest service, how to show up on time to a job, how to deal with a coworker that's maybe someone you don't really like working with. You know, one of the things that I often share with my HR colleagues, you know, in the world out there is we're preparing them for you. Not everyone's going to stay and work at Lagoon for the next 30 years like me. They're going to leave us and go out into the world and they're going to be the attorneys and the doctors and the bankers, wherever they end up in life, their first job experience is going to be Lagoon. And so I do take it serious. I take it to heart. You know, we're teaching these people and preparing them for the rest of their lives.
David, what one piece of advice would you give to a teenager who's going to interview for their first job?
Be flexible. It may not be exactly what you think it's going to be. It may be intimidating. It may be having to talk. Have them be prepared for the workforce. Have them be prepared to have a conversation with people. How to look people in the eye when you're talking to them. How to ask questions. How to ask for feedback. Those skills to me are the number one advice I have for people is be better communicators.
Rob, why don't you describe the employment-related services you provide for Lagoon?
I guess they would generally fall under a few categories. One of the constants is employees who are struggling in some way, either conduct-wise or performance-wise. And how do we manage that? Giving the employees the benefit of the doubt, and which Lagoon is so good at, and David is so good at, trying to help the employees succeed, while also we do live in a country with a lot of employment laws. There's some tension between complying with the laws and good employee performance and conduct management. Lagoon does such an amazing job with the culture there and the feeling of respect and safety that I'm actually sort of amazed how rarely David and I are talking about people being jerks to each other or harassing each other. Yeah, there's going to be some people who cause interpersonal problems, but really that's something that I don't have to help them with very much. Lagoon does have an interesting aspect to it where it is mostly exempt from the main federal wage and hour law, the Fair Labor Standards Act, but mostly it's a lot of Utah state laws when it comes to wage hour laws that David and I have talked about, and particularly child labor. It's a tricky area. There's a lot of very detailed laws about the kinds of work people under 18 can do, when they can work, the hours, the days, the shifts, things like that, the breaks that you have to give them. David is so on top of all this stuff, but some of the issues still get tricky sometimes. I also there's all kinds of papers and documents involved in the employment relationship, like a company's employee handbook. David and I have worked on keeping Lagoon's employee handbook as up to date and full of best practices as possible. And then my favorite thing to do is probably the training that I've done for Lagoon. I've done lots of harassment training, mostly for the leaders. For a lot of them, it is their first time being a leader, being someone who might be called a supervisor or a leader or a ship lead or something like that, which changes the way I present and somewhat changes some of the areas I focus on. So that's been very rewarding and really truly fun. I have such a great sense of satisfaction knowing that I am a small part, just a very small part of the environment, especially when it comes to the legal side of things, like preventing harassment and in particular sexual harassment, because David has had me come out many times and do that training. Just last week, I was out there with David and his HR team providing a really interesting and fun training on the Americans with Disabilities Act and a few other laws that require accommodations to employees. We had just a really great conversation sitting around with his HR team that he mentioned before. So I think that covers the main things that I've handled and worked with David and his team there for.
We'll be right back after this short break.
Looking for the best place to grow your business? Welcome to Utah, ranked the #1 state for economic outlook 18 years running. Make the move to join global leaders in advanced manufacturing, aerospace and defense, life sciences and healthcare, software and IT, and financial services. With a young, educated workforce, smart tax incentives, and an unmatched quality of life, Utah is where innovation meets opportunity. Learn more at business.utah.gov.
I'm curious, what format does the employee handbook take? Is it printed? Is it digital? Is it an app, website? What is it?
We do a little bit old school.
So you print it.
We do. When we hire a young person, we say, this is your handbook. This is going to give you all of the rules and policies and what our expectations are for you as a team member and that you have a new job. One of the biggest compliments I ever got about our handbook was we were in a situation a few years ago where we were having a mediation process, and the mediator, the UALD, gave me the best compliment I ever have. He said, this handbook is excellent and it's appropriate for the age group that you're hiring. It has photos in it and pictures. And there's a reason I do that. It's a little untraditional because I know what young people's mindset is. If you give them a document that's 30 pages of just words, they're not going to read it. I want it to be something that's visually appealing as well, that I know they're going to look through it and thumb through it and at least. My hope is that they read every word of that, but I know that I also have a duty to give them that in a format that really is going to invite them to look at it, right? And that's something I feel strongly about. Not only do we give them the words, we give them the invitation to look at those words by pictures, and it's not a really small print. And then we also do a great job of covering those important topics in an orientation, giving them an opportunity to ask questions and putting it in a format that's going to be making a difference, right?
I love what you do. And I love that you got that compliment. I'll tell everybody if they don't know what the UALD is, that's the Utah Anti-Discrimination and Labor Division. That's part of our labor commission here. So it's not a part of our government that you want to have to go visit, but every once in a while, an employer does get a claim made against them. And that's an awesome compliment that the media gave you guys.
Rob, I can't help myself. When our daughter was a junior in high school, she helped open a popular restaurant that had lines out the door, and she's still in high school. And one Sunday, she got home at like 2 a.m. before school, and because they had to clean up after they closed at midnight. And as parents, we were just floored that an employer would expect that of a teenager. And then my wife is a high school teacher at Harriman High School, and quite often she will have students who come to class and just lie their head on their desk, and she'll ask why they're so tired, and it'll be because they were out late working. What's the law for teenage workers?
There are very specific limits on the number of hours that a minor can work in a day, and that changes depending on whether it's the school year or the not school year. Also, how late they can work. In a way, it's common sense. We don't want our kids focusing more on work than school, and so we don't want them working too many hours. We don't want them working too late. Also, there are very specific rules about the actual tasks they can do. Those are safety related mostly. So, that's one of those laws that I think does make common sense, and I don't often say that about a lot of employment laws, but the child labor ones really are there to protect our kids, not only their health, but also let them focus on being kids and focus on school.
And certainly we should have a disclaimer with this episode that Rob is not giving legal advice as part of this conversation, right? Is that helpful for you?
Yes, it is. I wouldn't want anyone to take anything I'm saying as legal advice for their specific situation here.
I would add on, I spend a lot of time educating our managers. We put in a lot of checks and balances and accountability systems for that because not only are there laws, as an employer, I think we have a responsibility to care for the individuals that come and work with us in our organizations. And so I take even a step further. Yes, there's laws. Yes, there's rules, but there's also that importance of remembering that these are someone's loved ones, right? They've put them on loan to us. We should care for them and send them back the same way they came to us, cared for.
David, are there some specific things related to seasonal employment and how that might differ from year-round on your employees?
As far as seasonal employment goes, it can be challenging to recruit enough workforce. That's the first thing that, as you ask that question, that comes to my mind, is making sure that we have enough staff to operate. You mentioned, Pete, you have a daughter that works, during the school year, and there are a lot of people that do want jobs, wanting something a little more consistent around the year. So it's hard to say, we just are going to employ you for basically a few months. And that's why we go after a lot of recruitment efforts towards young people that are still in school. Focus on your schoolwork during the year and come work with us in the summer. We also have a lot of work and travel programs that we implement where we have international employees that come and work with us in the summer. You never have enough people to help out.
How do you promote that program, David? How do people find out about that opportunity?
We work with an organization that's called the Sponsor Agency that's out of California. They are experts in the international exchange program. These individuals, they're all college students that come and work on a J1 visa program. It's one of which there's many visa programs. This one is intended for international university students. It focuses on not only a working program, but also a cultural exchange program. So not only are we providing them a work experience, we're also making sure that we provide them a cultural experience. We are very fortunate to work with a great organization that's called Intrax. They're a sponsor agency that works very closely with the U.S. Department of State, one of the larger sponsor agencies in the United States. And we've worked with them for close to 20 years. And they do a lot of the recruitment work. This year, we had students from about 8 different countries. And in fact, they're just now starting to go home. We had a great time with them this summer. Now we learn to love them and then send them home.
And do these students come already with English language skills?
They do. Yeah. Part of the requirements is they do have to speak English. Some obviously come at different levels, but they do great. And we love having them.
Rob, are there common legal pitfalls or mistakes that companies make when they're dealing with a young workforce?
Well, we already touched on, I think, what the most specific issue that dealing with when you employ minors is, and that is the child labor. The other one that I think is so important is, and we've mentioned this a couple of times here, is creating an environment of respect and safety, and at the bare minimum, making sure there's no unlawful harassment going on. That is, unfortunately, something that when I have other clients who have minors, people under 18, that tends to be a real tricky issue that causes a lot of problems. I'm not going to name any names of my clients here, but there's a few of them who also employ a lot of minors. and they are getting, unfortunately, mistreated often by their supervisors and managers, sometimes even their peers of the same age. But a harassment situation is always a bad thing in the workplace. It is compounded, and both from a moral and ethical standpoint, but even from a legal standpoint, it's much worse when we're talking about some 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old getting harassed, especially by, their supervisor who's 5, 10, 20, whatever years older than them. These are kids in their first job usually. They don't necessarily know what is appropriate behavior. They are easily victimized by people who are making some bad decisions when it comes to them. They don't know their rights often. They don't know how to stand up for themselves often. And that's why the EEOC, among other people like myself, think that the law doesn't change. It's the same laws at play, but the implementation of preventive measures becomes a little bit different and trickier and really more important. And again, I'll say one more time, Lagoon is excelling at that, keeping their kids safe there.
David, what's one thing that you are most proud of from your work at Lagoon?
The thing that makes me the most proud, I love watching someone come and work with us starting at 14, 15, and they become a seasonal leader, and they develop some leadership skills as well, and they leave us and they go out and conquer the world. That brings me so much joy to know that I had an impact on these people's lives, that I helped touch them, teach them, train them, prepare them for the world. And I don't know that that's an opportunity I could have at any other job. And we do prepare them. And part of that is teaching them the workforce. Bob talked a lot about harassment and workplace bullying, and that's things that are very real in the world. And we're teaching them what that means to not participate in that and to report that and to understand that. And we're teaching them about these things and not just giving a policy, right? But we are creating an environment that's inclusive, that's a place that people want to be. I get so proud when someone comes to me and says, this is my safe place. I left home and came to work because this is my safe place. This is where I feel comfortable. This is where I feel like I have a family. This is where I feel like I have friends. And to me, those are very proud moments that we're creating that safe place, because it's more than just a workplace. At the end of the day, we need people to come and operate rides and operate food stands, and we're a business, right? We're here to make money and to be a part of the business community. But for me, I get to see the other side of it as well. We're providing a workplace environment that is worth coming to. And that's something that I am extremely proud of.
Rob, what do you find rewarding about working with advising Lagoon?
I don't know how to say it any better than what David just said. And to know that I am a very small part. I'm one of David's tools in his toolbox to do all the amazing things Lagoon does. Because of the environment that Lagoon creates for its employees, it creates the amazing environment that we as Lagoon guests all enjoy too. And that comes into the fact that the people there feel safe and respected. It comes from the amazing fact that Lagoon has this multicultural international workforce. It's almost like a United Nations going on at Lagoon. It's amazing. It's one of my favorite things about working there. And really, David is such a good person that you can just feel it, that he really cares about this stuff. I'm not one of David's employees. I don't work for Lagoon. I am a tool that David gets to take advantage of when necessary to help him do his job, which is furthering Lagoon's amazing mission and the part of the community that they are here in Utah.
On our podcast, we like to highlight what it's really like to live and work in Utah, and what the economy's like, the environment, all those things. So, Rob, to you first, what do you find most rewarding or inspiring about Utah's business community? You are an entrepreneur, a solopreneur. What do you like about doing business in our state?
I've lived and worked in various places, even as a lawyer. My practice has exposed me to what it's like to be a lawyer, especially an employment lawyer, and work in the business community in many cities across America. And I will tell you one thing that I think we have here that is so special is we are the perfect size. And I mean that as far as Utah as a whole, but I'm most familiar with Salt Lake City, but I have clients all over the state. The environment that we have here is friendlier and more collegial and more cooperative than any other environment that I've ever worked in, lived in, or practiced in, even if I didn't live in the actual area. And there's just something about literally the population size and the dynamic and the personality of our population here that really makes it rewarding to be a part of, my client relationships, the various boards and organizations that I contribute time to, and really the greater HR, the human resources community, which is really the part of the business community in Utah that I am most intimately familiar with. HR people are my people. Those are the people I spend my time talking to. They're the people who have the needs and understand that employment laws are tricky and sometimes they need an employment lawyer. And I guess I'll just sort of recap all that by saying we have something special here that I have not experienced in any of the other places that I've lived or practiced law.
David, what's the best part of being part of Utah's business community for you?
The people. It's always about the people. I can't speak like Bob to say that I've worked in other states. I am born and raised Utah, but I have had the opportunity to work with other businesses and other organizations, not only in our state, but in our county also. We're very fortunate up here in Davis County. We have an amazing businesses that surround us as well. I've done a lot of work with the Davis Chamber of Commerce and met a lot of friends. And I don't just say colleagues because they are my friends that I've been able to surround myself with. I count myself very lucky to surround myself with other business associates in the region, in the county, in the state. One thing that I also find myself very fortunate is to associate with so many people that have helped me be a better person. Not just here in my organization, but in other organizations. I count myself lucky to surround myself with Rob, who I would say is very pivotal in my career as well, helping me be the HR person that I am. I came from a food service background, right? And a healthcare administration background, but I've been fortunate to surround myself with people that have helped me become a great HR leader and helped us as Lagoon be better as well. I do also serve on several organizations on the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. It's a global attractions industry that I belong to. So I do see what's happening in our industry around the world, and we're great here in Utah. And I am proud to work for an organization that I would say that we're a Utah icon. We've been here since 1886. Even before Utah became a state, Lagoon's been around and will be around forever. And I'm very proud to be part of Utah. And Lagoon is very proud to be part of Utah.
So before I let you go, David, anything for 2026 that you want to highlight for us from a Lagoon perspective? Anything exciting?
The thing that's great about our industry is there's always something, what's next, right? We have so many great plans that I wish I could tell you all about. Very shortly, we'll be announcing some things happening in 2026. So stay tuned in the next few weeks. That's coming. And even beyond, there's so many exciting things that I get so excited about. This industry is fun to be in. I look forward to the very near future as well as the little bit distant future for Lagoon. Some great things are coming.
We've been speaking with David Gray, Director of Human Resources at Lagoon Amusement Park, and attorney Rob Coursey with Modern Age Employment Law. And thank you both for taking some time to join us on the podcast.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. A lot of fun.
Nancy Sylvester, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Pete. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you share with our listeners what your favorite memory from visiting Lagoon is?
I really feel like my favorite memories of a Lagoon have a lot to do with my kids. I'm a 14-year transplant from California, and I just think Lagoon is one of the coolest places to have that wholesome activity right there in Davis County. I just think it's so neat. And as we're going to discuss in a minute, I think one of my favorite things about Lagoon actually has been able to see my daughter become part of their workforce. It's a really great first job for kids.
Yeah, we've discussed some labor laws and requirements that employers like Lagoon have to follow when they employ teens. And why don't you share how your teenager learned and what you think as a parent watching Lagoon with this young workforce?
So my daughter is Kirsten, and she's 16 now, but she started out there as a 14-year-old worker, and she started in food service. That was just one of the coolest things because she's not good at chores at home. I had some trepidation about her going and working for somebody else, and I really hoped that she would rise to the occasion, and she did. She excelled and, immediately started getting recognition for how hard she was working, and I thought, well, when is she going to come home and do this? With her own chores in the house. But what was so neat about, especially that first summer working there, I think she just really was so in love with the idea of working because she was in junior high at the time, which is, as most parents and kids will acknowledge, it's a very, very hard time. But when she got to work at Lagoon, because it's such a great work environment, they train their staff really well. They empower their employees to rise to the occasion. They teach them how to do customer service. They teach them what is required to work in the workplace and appropriate behaviors and set good boundaries with them. She just loved that. She loved the structure of the environment. And of course, she loved making money. I think that first summer, I feel like she made, over $2,000. And for a kid that has no bills, that was just unbelievable. And I say that, from a place of privilege, like we really felt like this was meant to be a learning experience. Now, some kids are going to have different experiences where they need to contribute to their households. And it's also a great opportunity for that as well. But that first summer, she had so much money. And what was so cool was she went and she bought her own clothes. She bought her own makeup. She bought her own shoes. Like she set herself up for her school shopping and then it was gone. So then that was an opportunity to talk to her about saving and, how quickly money can go when you're not paying attention. And she learned a lot. We learned a lot. And that was what was really fun about being able to see her get to work.
As a parent, did you have any concerns about, balancing work and school and a social life?
We always have to keep an eye on those things as parents, and especially because she does struggle a little bit academically. She's doing so much better now. We did have to keep an eye on those things. Of course, during the summer, it's a little bit easier because they don't have to worry about that school piece. But during the school year, certainly we had to kind of work with her and with Lagoon a little bit on some working hours. And maybe she's only working one shift a week, for example, or two at the most. And there were some regulations around 14 and 15-year-olds working, but we noticed she was getting too tired. We'd say, no time with friends, for the next couple of days, just focus on school. But I think, the nice thing about seeing how she interacted with the workplace was having an opportunity to have a discussion with her about kind of what her limits are. And again, that invites some discussions as parents about, what that should look like for them.
Did you see some changes or improvement in maybe some executive function skills like scheduling and being responsible? And talk about how her skills maybe changed through her time there.
Executive functioning, I think, is hard for any kid, and then you add any challenges on top of that and it can get worse. I think you add technology, and as much as technology can be a help to us, it can also be a drawback because I think there's some technology-induced ADHD that we all have. But she knew that she had to be on time. And so that meant that not only planning to be there on time when work started, but also what's the commute to get there. That invited those discussions about, what it takes to actually get to the workplace, but also just leadership, right? I mean, she was empowered to do her job and was given feedback about how she was doing her job. And that was really, really helpful. And I think that also invited that feedback and then kind of recognizing that was really helpful to her, translated over to her having some good dynamic discussions with school too about what she needs in order to excel. And so I just think that opportunity to work when kids are younger and have a little bit more parent supervision, I think is just really critical in terms of them being able to feel like they can be independent, feel like they can work hard, but also have some structure around them so that they don't overdo it.
Has she stayed in food service or done anything else at Lagoon?
So last summer, she did food service again as a 15-year-old. And then this year, she got to be a lifeguard, which that has been actually a really interesting experience because talk about empowering these teens and these youth to really take charge of things. I mean, they're literally in charge of saving people's lives, sometimes actually frequently, I think. But also, she's described a few instances where she's dealt with some harassment. These are young kids. They're in bathing suits. They're at the pool. Like this is a high-risk environment for that kind of behavior. And she was empowered by her employer to kick people out who were being inappropriate. And I thought, well, not only does the law encourage that and require it in many instances, but to say to especially a young woman, that behavior is unacceptable. We believe it's unacceptable and you are empowered to do something about it. That is just, I think, one of the coolest things, especially like Rob Coursey. I'm also an employment attorney. And so to be able to see that Lagoon is doing things right and teaching these kids that these are the appropriate boundaries. And when somebody crosses over those, you are empowered to do something, I think is really, really neat.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to another parent whose teenager's thinking about getting a first job?
Do it. I mean, I really feel like, we have to trust that our kids, they may fail a little bit, but when it comes to this and trying to figure out that balance, but I would say don't be afraid to let your kid go try this. But the advice I would give, there's a few things. Make sure that they have good transportation to get there because their employer is going to expect that. Make sure that they've got an ability to communicate both with you and the employer because, if things come up, if they're running late, they need to be able to talk to the employer. They need to be able to talk to you and tell you what their shifts are like. But also I do think that our generation of parenting has kind of gotten a bad rap of kind of maybe being a little bit too helicopter. I think being able to allow our teens to work and kind of setting them free a little bit, that allows us to kind of take a step back and let them interact with that environment where they're expected to have more responsibilities. And I think particularly in this, this AI age, those skills they're going to develop are so critical because the workplace is now changing rapidly. In order to be able to kind of compete compete in the future workplace, I really feel like developing these skills early on of working for an employer is really huge, because not everybody can be an internet influencer, or start their own business. Like, most people are going to go work for an employer. And so find a good employer to work for, like Lagoon, and, let your kids go experience it. But now, of course, because like I mentioned, I'm an employment attorney. I work for Ogletree Deakins. I will say this caveat too, that not every employer is Lagoon. Not everybody has Rob Coursey as their, employment attorney, or Nancy Sylvester as their employment attorney guiding them. And so I would say that watch for any red flags as your teen works. Watch for whether there's appropriate hours. 14, 15-year-olds can only work a certain amount of hours in the school day, and they're not supposed to work, certain types of jobs. 16 and 17-year-olds can work jobs that are not considered hazardous, and they've got fewer restrictions on their hours. But keep an eye on it, and then keep an eye on too, is there any kind of harassing behavior, and maybe take appropriate steps if you start to hear that. But again, have these dialogues with your teen. Potentially reach out to supervisors in the workplace if you have concerns, because our teens aren't going to know exactly what to do in those situations. Be proactive. Let them kind of figure this out. Give them a little bit of rope to figure it out and have those discussions. But then if you need to, step in and have a discussion with the workplace about what may be not appropriate. Pete, you and I are involved in A Bolder Way Forward. This is actually one of the initiatives I feel really strongly about, is kind of bringing up our next generation. And so kind of stay tuned for some training on this for employers, because Rob Coursey, Joshua Clark, and I would really like to dig down on this idea of helping our youth get into the workplace. I really, like, on a variety of levels, I think this is an antidote to the mental health conditions that we see a lot of our youth have, getting away from some of this technology that can be destructive and being part of something bigger, but also trying to get ahead of some of this AI revolution and building some good skills that will help our future generation become our leaders and be able to move with that.
Nancy Sylvester, thanks for joining our conversation with Lagoon.
Thank you, Pete. Really appreciate it.
Here is a quick update from the Economic Opportunity Office for the week of August 31st, 2025. The Economic Assistance Grant application is open now until September 15th, 2025. The grant assists Utah businesses in promoting and supporting economic opportunities and provides services related to industry, education, community development, and infrastructure. GOEO's Economic Development Tax Increment Financing Tax Credit Program continues to deliver record success. The program provides refundable tax credit for businesses that perform and create high-paying jobs in exchange for a temporary reduction in their marginal tax rates. Through these efforts, Utah continues to attract and retain top-tier companies that strengthen our economy and create jobs. To learn more about any of our updates, please visit business.utah.gov.
Thanks to our office marketing communications team for their work on this episode. You can find and follow us on social media at Business Utah. Please feel free to email us with feedback or episode suggestions at business@utah.gov. The Business Elevated podcast is published by the Utah Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. I'm your host, Pete Codella. Thanks for listening.
The views and opinions of podcast guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity or the state of Utah.